Granholm, Secretary Granholm, thanks for being with us this morning. Let's talk about these disasters and let's talk about how much money you think ought to be committed to fight climate change. We know in the Congress, White House is going to ask Congress for about $25 billion for immediate relief as we look at Hurricane Ida and the wildfires in the West. I know President Biden is headed out west in a matter of days. But big picture here, within these massive pieces of legislation that we're talking about, infrastructure, human infrastructure, how much of that gets at these questions around climate change?
Yeah, I mean, there is two pieces, right, Willie? There is what do you do about addressing the impacts of climate change, which is building back better and resiliency and all of that. And then what do you do to prevent further climate change? And that's why the president has a goal of getting to 100% clean electricity by 2035 and net zero carbon pollution by 2050. And in that reconciliation budget, there is a two very significant pieces of legislation. One is called the Clean Energy Payment Plan, and that would incentivize the utilities to build out clean electricity on the grid so that you can get to that 100% goal by 2035 or 80% by 2030. The second piece is to incentivize the private sector to do those build outs. So extending tax credits for clean energy, clean defined broadly, so that nuclear, geothermal, obviously wind, solar, hydropower can be included. The bottom line is the reason why we are seeing these extreme weather events is because we are putting carbon pollution into the air, and that is warming the oceans, that is causing climate change. So we have to do our part to reduce that. And then we can go to the rest of the world with our head high, having some moral authority to say everyone has to get on board. And we're not the only ones saying that, of course. All of these other countries have signed on to getting to net zero carbon pollution by 2050. We just need to help make sure that everyone is on board, and that includes China and India and other countries.
Good morning, Madam Secretary. It's Jonathan Lemire. I wanted to follow up on that. The pieces of climate proposal in this legislation, or is the president going to draw red lines around them, say they have to be included in this bill, even if it does shrink as it's negotiated in Congress this fall? And you mentioned about other countries. The Scotland Climate Summit looms in a month and a half or so. What is the president's message going to be there? How tough will his talk be to countries like China, Russia, India, and others?
As you can imagine, Jonathan, his talk could be a lot tougher if we did our part. I mean, if we do nothing, what moral authority do we have to pressure other countries to do the same? We are a massive carbon polluter as a country, so we've got to do our part. And that's why this goal of getting these provisions in that second step, that reconciliation step, are the pieces that will address climate change. And then he also has to get the pieces that allow communities to build back better. And that's why it's very significant to do that. And let me just say one other thing about that, because the costs of inaction are so expensive. Just earlier this year, we paid $152 billion to clean up after the Texas weird winter storm. That $152 billion is just one event. And we are seeing these extreme weather events escalate. Ida is not the only one. The wildfires are not the only one. Let me just say, in the 1980s, as a nation, we spent about $13 billion a year cleaning up after extreme weather events. In the 1990s, it was double that, $27 billion. In the 2000s, it rose to $51 billion. In the past 3 years, we have spent $152 billion a year cleaning up after these extreme weather events. And the Texas storm was $130 billion alone. I'm just saying, if we do not do this now, you better believe the price tag is just escalating, and it's escalating exponentially.
The math is there. Energy Secretary Jennifer Granholm, thank you very much for being on this morning.